Today's story is about Dorothea Puente, who seems like a friendly grandma who loves to bake cookies and have tea parties. No one could have predicted that she is a convicted American serial killer who murdered vulnerable people such as elderly and mentally disabled individuals by acting like a nice lady who is willing to help them. She was born Dorothea Helen Gray on January 9, 1929, in Redlands, California. Her parents were Trudy May and Jesse James Gray. During her childhood, she experienced serious trauma. Her parents were both alcoholics, and her father repeatedly threatened to commit suicide in front of his children. Her father died of tuberculosis in 1937. Her mother lost custody of her children in 1938 and died in a motorcycle accident by the end of the year. Puente and her siblings were subsequently sent to an orphanage where she was sexually abused and mentally tortured. At the age of 16, she married a man called Fred McFowle, and they had 2 daughters together. She sent one child to live with relatives in Sacramento and placed the other for adoption. Her husband left her in 1948 after she suffered a miscarriage. In the spring of 1948, Gray was arrested for purchasing women's accessories using forged checks in Riverside. She was charged and pled guilty to 2 counts of forgery, serving 4 months in jail and 3 years probation. 6 months after her release, she left Riverside. In 1952, she married her second husband, Axel Bren Johansson, in San Francisco. She created a fake persona claiming to be a Muslim of Egyptian descent. They had an unstable marriage. While her husband was away at sea, she invited men to their home and gambled away his money. In 1960, she was arrested again for owning and operating a brothel in Sacramento. She was found guilty and was sentenced to 90 days in the Sacramento County Jail. While she was there, doctors diagnosed her as a pathological liar with an unstable personality. Gray and Johansson divorced in 1966. 2 years later, she married Roberto Jose Puente. However, they separated only after 16 months, the cause supposedly being domestic abuse. Even though they separated, she continued to use his last name Puente. After the divorce, she found a new way of causing trouble. This time, she wanted to run a boarding house in Sacramento. She established herself as a respected member in Sacramento's Hispanic community, funding charities, scholarships, and radio programs. She eventually met and married Pedro Montalvo, though he left her only a week after their marriage. In 1982, a 53-year-old woman by the name Ruth Monroe began living with Puente in her upstairs apartment, but soon died from an overdose. Puente told police that the woman was very depressed because her husband was terminally ill. They believed her and ruled the death as a suicide. A few weeks later, the police returned after Malcolm McKenzie, a 74-year-old person, accused Puente of drugging and stealing from him. On August 18, 1982. Puente was convicted of 3 theft charges and sentenced to 5 years in prison. There, she met a 77-year-old man called Everson Gilmouth from Oregon. A pen-pal friendship developed, and when Puente was released in 1985, after serving 3 years of her 5-year sentence, he met her outside the prison, driving a red 1980 Ford pickup. Their relationship developed quickly, and they planned on getting married. In November 1985, Puente hired a man to install some wood paneling in her apartment. She asked him to build a large box to store books and other items, as she called it. She then asked him to transport the box to a storage depot. The man agreed, and Puente assisted him. They stopped at Garden Highway in Sutter County and dumped the box on the riverbank. On January 1st, 1986, a fisherman spotted the suspicious box near the river and called police. Investigators opened the box and found the badly decomposed body of an elderly man inside. Puente continued to collect Gilmouth's pension and wrote letters to his family, explaining that the reason he had not contacted them was because he was ill. She continued to maintain a boarding house, taking in 40 new tenants. Gilmouth's body remained unidentified for 3 years. Puente continued to accept elderly people and was popular with local social workers because she accepted everyone, including drug addicts and abusive tenants. She collected their monthly mail before they saw it. During this period, parole agents visited Puente at least 15 times. Suspicion around Puente first arose when neighbors noticed the odd activities of a homeless alcoholic known only as Chief, whom Puente stated she had adopted and hired as her handyman, who suddenly disappeared. On November 11th, 1988, police were informed of the disappearance of a tenant, Alvaro Montoya, who had been reported missing by his social worker. After noticing disturbed soil on the property, they uncovered the body of tenant Leona Carpenter, 78. 7 bodies were eventually found buried on the property. Puente was charged with a total of 9 murders. Everson Gilmouth, Ruth Monroe, Leona Carpenter, Alvaro Gonzalez Montoya, Dorothy Miller, Benjamin Fink, James Gallup, Vera Faye Martin, and Betty Palmer. According to investigators, most of her victims had been drugged until they overdosed. Puente then wrapped them in bed sheets and plastic lining before dragging them to open pits in the backyard for burial. Her trial began in October of 1992 and ended a year later. The prosecutor, John O'Mara, was the homicide supervisor in the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office. He argued to the jury that Puente had used sleeping pills to put her tenants to sleep, then suffocated them and hired convicts to dig the holes in her yard. The defense called several witnesses who showed Puente had a generous and caring side to her. Witnesses, including her long-lost daughter, testified how Puente had helped them in their youth and guided them to successful careers. Mental health experts testified of Puente's abusive upbringing and how it motivated her to help the less fortunate. The jury deliberated over a month and eventually found Puente guilty of 3 murders, although they could not agree on the other 6. Puente received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. She was incarcerated at Central California Women's Facility. For the rest of her life, she maintained her innocence, insisting that all of her tenants had died of natural causes. Puente died in prison in 2011 from natural causes. She was 82 years old. So what are your thoughts about this case? Leave a comment down below who I should cover next. Thank you all for watching.